Thanks so much for the introduction, Lacey. And I've got to apologize a bit up front because I'm getting over a cold and I know my voice isn't 100%. So hopefully I will make it through the session and everyone can hear me. It's a real pleasure to have all of you on the line today and also to be joined by the team at Frito. Thanks so much. We're going to be talking about the ERG work, and in particular we're going to focus in on a subject that we think is very important in the evolution of ERGs to what's called business resource groups. And the topic and the focus is innovation. So we're going to really look at, the degree to which ERGs can help not just their ERGs innovate, but their companies also innovate. Just to give you some background, Lacey mentioned that we have the 2014 ERG coming up in July. We've been doing this program now for 3 years. I actually started working with ERGs in about 2005 when I was doing some work with General Motors. And it was interesting because I was a professor and have been a professor teaching in the human resource management area, and I had never heard of ERGs until I started working with the General Motors team. So that was a bit of a shock for me. It's amazing when you look at it from a research perspective, there's really not much at all written or work done on the topic. So I became very intrigued because just from firsthand seeing how much they were doing and how powerful they were in the organizations that we didn't know much about them. And I'm very fortunate that in 2012 we were able to do our first ERG Leadership Summit. And the idea was to bring together multiple companies and within each of those firms the leaders of the different ERGs so they could learn from each other, we could learn from them also. And then also because of the lack of research work, we were very fortunate that these organizations agreed to the idea of a data-driven conference where we conducted surveys with all of the members. In the first summit, we really focused on building leadership skills with the ERGs. And we used the research work to understand the degree to which the individuals were obtaining leadership skills through their experiences. And through what we learned in the first summit, we decided to focus the second one on ERGs as sources of innovation. And we collected quite a bit of data from organizations when we did that summit, and that's what we're going to be presenting today. And we're getting ready to kind of morph into this next topic, which is not only sort of ERGs as being sources of innovation, but also sources for the business overall. So as I mentioned already today, we're going to focus on some of the research learning, and in addition, taking a quick peek at the data and what we learned, we're also very pleased to be able to showcase a case study from Frito-Lay, which will really exemplify the kinds of information that we learned from the research. Just to give you a little bit of background, as I mentioned earlier, the participants in each of the conferences also were part of a research study. So the companies that were involved had two options of how to participate. Some of the companies did what I'll call more of a deep dive research project where we collected data from all the ERG members in addition to a random sample of non-ERG members. So that gave us the ability to see what was happening within the ERGs that might be different from what's going on in the companies. And then in other organizations, we needed a lighter touch approach, and we just took an anonymous survey link, and all of the ERGs leaders sent that to their members. We focused in 2013 on 3 topics. One was innovation, and then we also continued to collect data on 2 topics we had gotten information on earlier. One is just ERG process, the kinds of things the ERGs were doing, the extent to which the members were satisfied with some of the work that they were getting, and the degree to which the ERG was impacting their own jobs, and then also ERG leadership. If you look at what we did in 2013, we were very fortunate to have 22 companies participate. And within those companies, we had 26 different ERGs. The 26 different ERGs had enough people respond to receive their own reports and for us to do what we thought was a deeper dive in the data. Altogether, 904 total respondents gave complete data, which means they took the survey from beginning to end, and we have over 1,000 people who at least completed part of it. What happens with surveys, some people start, and then for some reason their companies keep them busy and they're interrupted, so they don't complete all of it. As you can see here really quick, we had quite a few different ERGs, and then there's a bucket here called Other because there's so many mixes of them. For example, we might have women in technology, and what you see is these labels start to combine, which means you get a lot of different kinds of ERGs. And some of them have been around longer than others. The generational one seems fairly new, and the environment sustainability ERG was new, but we're seeing more and more companies very interested in those. What I did for this presentation was pulled out the questions that were specifically related to innovation, since that's the focus for today. And what you're looking at here is a result for the overall sample. So this is the almost 1,000 people who answered. And I'd like you to look at the questions that are at the top of the list and at the bottom. So all of the questions, relatively speaking, are fairly high. We used a 1 to 5 scale, where 1 is disagree, 5 is agree, is very much agree, and you're looking at the mean, the percent of people who answered a 4 or 5, the neutral, which is 3, and negative 1 or 2. So as you kind of peruse this, you'll see that in most cases, the ERG members were very positive about the degree to which their leaders or within their ERG there was an environment for innovation. And that's what we hypothesized. So when we thought about ERGs and we looked at our learning from the first year, we walked away thinking that ERGs were a potential source of innovation. They seemed to be what we were hearing from people was that the ERG was a safe zone for innovation. So my boss isn't there watching me. I'm not going to get criticized if my idea is a bad one. Again, within the organization, it was this place where I could be and maybe bring part of who I am and my ideas, my creativity in a very safe manner. And the data was very consistent with that thinking. The somewhat lower scores were more about the company being supportive or of them. So when they start to leave their ERG, what's happening. And that didn't surprise us because, again, there's a lot of variance to which the organizations people perceive the organization to be supportive of ERGs, and in some cases our ERGs were new, so employees didn't even know whether their company was going to be supportive of them or not. The other topic that we asked in 2012 and 2013 was about energy at work, and part of the reason for doing this is I mentioned I was doing work at General Motors years ago, and then continued to do some research along those years between 2005 and 2012, and we found in a number of organizations that being in ERG had a positive effect on productivity and employee energy. And employee energy, via lots and lots of research that I have, is basically a way to assess productivity. So we find it predicts performance, it predicts performance and productivity in a number of ways. This is just one picture that we've used to go along with the energy metric. So what we ask people is to rate their energy at work on the 0 to 10 scale, and then rate where they're at their best, so at their best or most productive. And the gap between the two represents lost productivity. What we learned in the 2013 data was overall the ERG's energy was at 6.61, which is in the very energized zone. But the gap between the two was 1.58, and that's very consistent with what we see in organizations overall, that companies basically they're not creating an environment where people are at their best, and there's a lot of reasons for that that kind of go beyond the scope of this seminar. But we use this data then because even though it's average, we had people who were very much close to where they were at their best and some people who weren't. And in fact, when we analyzed the data with innovation, what we saw was people who had lower gaps were the individuals who, I use the term here, had more of an innovation mindset. So when we did the survey work, we asked about their innovation within their ERG. We also asked about the degree to which they were innovating in their jobs. As part of the survey, people recorded the number of ideas they submitted to the company overall, and then how many were accepted. And we've used this metric in other studies, and we've validated it, so you're comfortable that it represents accurate data. And what we learned was people who were feeling like they were in the zone, they were at their best, were the ones who were giving more ideas. The other area we looked at in terms of data was related to some measure of ERG performance, and we started using this in 2012. found from the research that it worked, and so we used it again in 2013. It's a very simple question. We asked the participants on a 0 to 100 point scale to rate the degree to which their ERG was meeting its goals and objectives. And they could answer anywhere from 0 to 100. So what I've done is very quickly giving you a sense of the kinds of questions we asked. Questions about innovation, their attitudes towards innovation within their ERG, within their company. We also asked the degree to which they were being innovative, submitting ideas and having their ideas accepted. We asked about their energy at work to get a sense on, what was happening and how they were doing overall personally. And as we put together the data, and for those of you who are total research geeks like me, we have lots of information to back this up, but the summary is that these three key things were predictive and statistically significant in our analyses with all sorts of control variables and doing the right kind of math. But basically, the ERG supporting innovation, being in the zone of energy, and the company supporting innovation all predicted the innovation mindset. Not just that their ERGs were innovative, but that individuals took that experience in their ERGs back to their jobs. So we saw the ERG was like, think of it as like a playground, a little sandbox for innovation where they got comfortable and they were safe, and then they were able to take that back to their jobs and be more innovative in their own positions. And again, that they felt like their ERGs also were doing a better job for them. So from the ERG leader perspective, we were able to give them some action items on what they could do to assure that their members were more satisfied and with their ERG. And then we were also able to look at how ERGs can help the organization. Excuse me. The cold is coming back here, through innovation. So let me dig now into Frito-Lay a little bit because they're going to talk about their case and what they did and kind of bring all of this data to life for you. When we looked at the data from Frito-Lay, I thought it was very interesting that their answers to these questions were statistically significantly higher than the answers from all the other companies put together. So Frito-Lay is doing something to create an environment in the company and with their ERGs where people feel like it's safe to play with new ideas and safe to be innovative. So keep that in mind as you hear the Frito-Lay story. And then we also dug into the Adelante data, and we found what we did was compare their questions, their scores and their questions, to the answers to other ERGs like them. And they also had statistically significantly higher scores on the questions listed here. So this particular ERG is also able to create an environment where people feel like they can be creative and innovative. So what you're seeing is a company that's been able to create Frito-Lay a culture overall where innovation is accepted, and then an ERG where they've also been able to take that to the next level. So with that, and what I'd like to do is hand it over to Lisa, who's going to start telling you the story that brings everything to life.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Lisa Amoroso, and thank you for joining us today. Most of you guys know we are a family member of the PepsiCo parent, and obviously we have lots of billion-dollar brands we're very proud of, as well as exist globally. And Frito-Lay is a wonderful, growing $13 billion business, and we're proud to talk about some wonderful results we had last year as well. So I'll go to the next slide. If you're not familiar with us, there's a few brands hopefully are in your cupboard. So just to let you know, there's a lot of extensions to our family that some folks don't know we own. So we're proud of all these great brands. On the next slide, I'll go a little bit more relevant to our company and the topic of this particular webinar. We have 11 ERGs that we're extremely proud of. There's a few that have been around for a long time and others that are fairly new. And I will tell you, all of them dabble a bit in innovation. Some of them are a bit more bold, as you'll hear from Adelante today and our speaker that we have with us. And some of them are a bit more subtle, but each of them, as they grow confidence and have successes, are seeing some wonderful outcomes in terms of impacting, whether it's our talent or our people, or it's our business results. And some are being innovative in our community space as well, or our culture space, which is exciting. So most of these are pretty straightforward in terms of the constituents they represent. The one that's probably not as specific or clear is Aspire, which is also a bit different than I found other companies have. And that one in particular basically is for our administrative group and our independent contributors who support the business. And a lot of their key charter is really working on development of themselves so they can contribute more in the business. So that's been a wonderful new addition to our ERG family. The next slide really just shows you kind of how we're structured. So PepsiCo as a whole has a council, but each of our sectors, so we have what we call PepsiCo Foods, and then underneath of that, of course, each sector, and Frito-Lay, of course, is a key one of the largest. We have both our field, and HQ represents the headquarters. So we have ERGs, and we also have what we're calling inclusion councils, and they are basically a group that's not focused on a particular constituent. They're focused on the entire population. And so for headquarters, you'll see the 11 ERGs that we just talked about. And if you move to the middle of the page, you'll see in the field, what we did is we created these what we call board of directors, which is what the BOD stands for. Sorry about our acronyms. And we have one in our supply chain and one in our sales, which is, of course, the critical mass of our company in the field locations in North America. Under that, we do have ERG national points, which, as you can tell by the lines, basically co-lead with the headquarter ERG chairs. And then, of course, they go across and they are part of each of our councils from our 12 regions, the way our Frito-Lay North America is constructed structurally. And they, of course, all go into a West and an East Inclusion Council. And that's how we operate. And while it looks complex, it's not obviously as complex as it appears. We do have some, I think, wonderful things that come out of it. We also have some opportunities making sure everybody gets a voice at the table. So that's something that we're continually trying to work on and improve from a structure, accountability, and sponsorship. If you go to the next page with the ERG evolution, you can see, as I said, some of the ERGs are much newer versus others are foundational and much more in our history. As I said, ERG has 4 chairs and 1 executive sponsor. We feel the sponsorship is really important, especially when it comes to the topic of innovation, as that obviously they're an enabler and they remove obstacles that are typically in our system and as in any company. So that's important. And I talked already about kind of the chairs are both in headquarters and field. And then, of course, the key things we focus on, as I mentioned, are both our talent, our people, our culture, which has been a real push lately for us to maintain the wonderful parts of our culture and continually push on parts that have some unintended consequences in the space, our partnerships with customers, of course, consumers, and our community. With that, what I'd like to do is, before I turn it over to Gisela, is talk to you a little bit about each of our 11 ERGs has had some wonderful innovation, and so I'll give you some quick examples, but then tell you about one of the best ones we have, which Gisela will speak to you about, which is Adelante. But a few other examples, our women's organization has created what we call WIN TV, which is a collaboration across multiple ERGs, and what they do is they create these short kind of TV snippets, if you will, obviously not on physical TV, but through our network and different social media that help bring our women together across all the geographies and coach them on different things and engage them across the geographical lines would be one example. A second example, before I turn it over to Gisela, is we just had our Equal, which is our LGBT network, partner with a outside company called Pacer, that's a not-for-profit, and then they partnered with a key customer of ours, which is typically a retailer or a supermarket, and actually they won an award just most recently. It was an internal PepsiCo award, but they literally were able to totally lift our sales from one year to the next by branding multi-pack or a multi-pack product with an anti-bullying campaign, putting in some orange shoelaces. And so we obviously clearly got our message to the community. Pacer got their message across. We felt great internally, and we helped raise sales for both ourselves and our customer. So there's some neat things we do, and I can go on about each of our ERGs and some of the small or large successes. But with that, I want to give the floor to Gisela Saenz, who's been wonderful. She has just recently, as a reminder, taken on the lead role of our Adelante Hispanic network. So with that, Gisela.
Thank you, Lisa. So as Lisa mentioned, our ERGs usually typically focus on talent and community, and Adelante definitely has planks in that. But in addition to that, we actually have a business plank, and our goal there is really just to continue to push our business agenda forward. So on the slide that you see here, you guys have probably all kind of heard or seen some of these data points in the past, but really the story here is that Hispanics are obviously growing really quickly. We actually are the second largest population here in the U.S. after Mexico, so that just kind of crystallizes the size of this population, and we're experiencing exponential growth. So obviously that all kind of leads to huge kind of purchasing power. So we have or will hit $1.5 trillion in 2015. So definitely a huge opportunity there. However, as we step back and kind of look at this opportunity, we kind of also see that we have more work to do here. So there are, a few things that we need to work on. So first would be going beyond awareness. So we definitely have very high brand awareness, and we are in the consideration set for most of these consumers. But we do need to do some work in actually translating this to more sales. And in particular, as you'll see in the middle of this slide, we have an opportunity with Caribbean Hispanics. So overall, our Hispanic consumer base is doing better than our non-Hispanic base in terms of sales. And we are particularly doing really well here in Dallas and in places like LA, where we have a very high kind of more Mexican Hispanic consumer base. However, if we look at areas where we have more of a Caribbean influence, like Miami, New York, we see that we have more work to do. So we definitely have an opportunity there. And so what we're looking to do is really take more of a nuanced approach. So continue to focus on the Mexican Hispanics in the West, but elevate the focus for Caribbean Hispanics in the East. And in doing so, we really need to pay attention to differences in talent, flavor, and just culture. So as you see on the next slide, we have had past successes in influencing the agenda. So for example, in 2012, we had, a lot of impact in terms of business. We had over $40 million of business impact, and we leveraged some tools like, internal surveys. We had label translation support, ideation around products and flavors. But, we really have an opportunity here to formalize the process. Most of these things were one-off, so just, the brand team would reach out to us and say, can you help me with this flavor or naming for this product? And we would reach out to our membership. But as I mentioned, it was one-off, really quick turnaround kind of projects. And so the key question as, we go into 2014 is really how can we formalize this process and improve our share of wallet with the Latino consumer? And we really kind of step back and looking at innovation in particular, we have a very kind of set path in terms of how we ideate and how we get that to commercialization. So here on this slide, you kind of see the three phases that we have within innovation, starting with insights and translating that to ideas, going into feasibility, and then into development. So as you see, the boxes that are kind of highlighted is where we kind of looked at the process and really decided we have an opportunity to really make an impact in these areas. And our mission is, as you'll see on the next slide, as we formalize the process, our mission is really to leverage our internal workforce to build a turnkey, cross-functional, and cross-divisional consulting panel to support our business initiatives across all of PepsiCo. And so this is really starting with seed, but going all the way to shelf. So here you kind of see the process laid out. So we have at the bottom the three stage gates that we use internally. So we have go to feasibility, go to develop, and go to scale up. However, before we even get to those stage gates, we have a lot of work that we do internally. And so there are specific areas where the Adelante Consulting Group, or ACG, can really make an impact. So starting with the ideation process and the insights, working our way to actually writing the concepts and using the correct language there, leveraging our membership to help with the basis of interest and just guardrails around the product, going all the way down to the naming and just the communication plan for these products. So on the next slide, I kind of just have laid out what we identified as next steps and important things to communicate in terms of our sponsors. So, really, knowing that these are set processes internally, we recognize the opportunity to leverage a champion internally to help us become, more top of mind as we're going through the process. So this is an example of the innovation sponsor where we are really starting the process. And so we want to ingrain the behavior of consumers or, us going through this process and leveraging all the stage gates. And so what we would want from our sponsor is really to advocate for us in senior meetings, meet with us quarterly so that we're on the same page. And I have other things laid out on the slide just in terms of the stakeholders that we're looking at, and again, what we would offer feedback on. So this slide is a little bit older. It's from last year. So obviously we've already gone through all those steps that you see on the right-hand side and have established the panel. But on the next slide, you'll see that our 2.0 kind of version of this would be going to shelf, as I mentioned, so more of the activation side. So just as we have set stage gate processes, on the innovation side, we have commercialization kind of alignment meetings that need to happen on the activation side. So the sponsor on the activation side will also help us get through this process and also just ingrain the behavior of having our, brand or sales teams come to us for help as they're commercializing these ideas. And so this goal would be to establish the panel by the middle of this year. And the good news is that we've already had over 160 members sign up for the panel, which is great. And we are now going to start the process of training them formally. So on the innovation side, we have the same agency that trains marketers that come over to innovation on how to ideate and how to provide that feedback and how to write concepts. We're going to provide that same training for this entire panel. And with that, I guess I'll turn it back over to Lacey to see if we have questions.
Yeah, and actually, this is Theresa. I had a couple questions for you, and then I think what we'll do is while I'm asking questions, if people on the line could also type in questions or raise your hand, we'll get your questions also. I'll kick it off with this one. As I look at the employees getting more formally involved in the innovation process, I wonder if there's ever a backlash to that where, ERG started out as something to help me and help my career, and now all of a sudden I'm helping the company. Do you hear it all where people say, well, this is just another way to get more work out of me, or it's more overtime?
That's a great question, and I will tell you as the D&I leader of the company, and I've been in the role, just for some context, about 2 years, and prior I actually was part of our women's group and ended up being the president just shy of taking this role, and that was, of course, a voluntary role, but just to give you context of my background. And I will tell you that the majority of ERGs, not all of them, but the majority of them, the key leaders of those do question, and so does the company to some extent, of how far we do want to push the ERG evolution to become BRGs. There has been some pushback and questions and thoughts around, wow, if I wanted to work on this, I could do that in my core job. I'm doing this, or I'm part of this group because I want to be with people like me, I want to network, I want to grow and develop, and they tend to question, are we getting too far away from its original intent? And so some of our ERGs that aren't as mature, and I don't mean it in a bad way, meaning haven't been around as long, are still in those phases and highly believe that they potentially, based on what the original charter is, should stick more to that. I will tell you they're still all dabbling and putting their toes in the water on these other areas, and they're understanding the successes both to the company and to themselves, and what that still then provides back to them, which is the original charter, whether it's networking, visibility, growth of themselves, personally and professionally. And so we do have a little bit of that. I wouldn't call it the strongest backlash, but I would say there is some questioning on if that's exactly what we want the ERGs to be, both from the ERGs themselves. And then on the second piece is from the company side, as the company in North America becomes flatter and flatter, and as we totally try to become more productivity oriented, right, to obviously give back more to our stockholders, we are a flatter organization, and we don't have many resources. And so while using ERGs is a great way to add to those resources, it's also in some ways adds complexity, because I'll call our marketing department, for example, or R&D department. They have so little resources, they're working on a $1 billion brand. If an ERG has a $100,000 or even $1 million idea, it's small in comparison, and do we have enough resources to work on both? And so interestingly enough, that's a really good problem to have, but it's also a bad problem to have. And so both that, hopefully I've answered your question, but I think on both sides, the ERGs as well as our executives and our business leaders have said, let's tread at this lightly and go pick the big successes, a few big ones. And this is one that Gisela talked about that we think could really play out both on what the demand is out there by our demographics changes and what we can offer as an ERG to our company to support them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I'm wondering, Gisela, did you have any answer to that either?
Yeah, I would just add that from an Adelante perspective, we definitely view this as an opportunity to just do other fun things. So, for example, we always get really high response rates when we send out anything via surveys in the past. We have people that are very passionate about our products, and so when you see something that hits the market, as a member of Adelante, for example, if you know that you had something to do with that, it's just something that, makes your job more fun. And so we feel like we've always had high engagement. We also see it as an opportunity to work on your leadership skills and also gain more visibility. And I actually just had, another member from another ERG, one of the younger kind of professionals, reach out to me just a couple weeks ago to just try to understand how they can also start to have more of a business impact in the company. So we definitely see it just as another opportunity to learn more skills and be more involved in the business side, which is always fun.
Great, thanks. It looks like we have a couple questions coming in here. Let's see. I'm gonna start with the first one we received. Someone asked if you could talk a little bit more about the formal structure of the ERGs, and they're looking for examples of, do you have different kind of bylaws or any other supporting information in terms of how to run?
Yeah, so let me address the bylaws first. So when we first started creating ERGs way back, and as each became developed, we actually approached it in a very formalized way with everything you guys are thinking about, bylaws, principles, a reporting structure, a selection criteria as well as a selection process. And I will tell you over time, it's become more informal for most. And because I think of the year-over-year continuity, we have now what you would have in your typical business, a pipeline of talent. And so while you have typically, we always have two chairs because as the business cycles are crazy, one is always more active than the other, and they support each other. And then similarly in the field, complement, so we cover all North America. But having said that, it's become very informal now in most cases, not all of them, but where literally there is no election or selection process. The people that are, so you have your two leaders, so let me talk about an ERG in particular, which I did not show you on the slides. You have your two ERG leaders from the field and from headquarters. Underneath, they have a group, an aligned charter, and that charter then comes to life through, we'll call them planks, or kind of key areas of focus. And typically they are around people or talent, they're around business and for some ERGs, they're around partnerships, and they're around culture. And what happens is those folks all have leaders, and typically, again, co-leads. Usually one of those is in a succession plan to take over for a chair. And we try to move one chair out at a time. They usually stay in place for 1 to 2 years. It depends on the ERG. And so you always have continuity. And then similarly, there's always new members being pulled in at the team level that works for each initiative under each plank. So if you can imagine, you have your chairs, your 4 planks underneath of what they're focused on, and underneath that you have these teams of people working on initiatives to bring that particular goal impact area to life. And they just keep flowing through. And of course, we have your typical attrition where people decide I don't want to be involved, or people say, I love this so much, I want to go to, a higher level more quickly. And we just look at that, in that particular way. And a lot of them are very independent. There's not a lot of oversight for me in that piece. What I do is I more set national direction and help steer them through budget guidelines and through kind of what we're working on. So as I mentioned this year, culture is big for us. We're rolling out some kind of critical cultural messaging and shifts that we're looking for. And so we'll share those, for example, with the ERGs. In fact, they help shape them. And then they will kind of help bring that to life within their ERG, but they'll still be focused on their core work. So that's how that works. in terms of the structure and the bylaws or the formality of it. Does that answer the question? Any other?
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to move on to another question, and I'll answer it, and then I want to get your feedback on it. So someone asked regarding ERG membership, are there multiple level groups? Or are they, I think what they're getting at, were they broken down from executives to mid-level managers versus line service? And at least from our experience in the ERG conference, it was interesting because we had people all over from a level point of view. We had somebody who was a leader, you know, of one group who was a receptionist, and someone in another group who was a leader who was an executive VP. So my sense of it is that once you're in an ERG, the levels are all mixed up. But let me ask the Frito-Lay team how it works in your organization.
That's exactly the same for us. I will tell you probably, so within the headquarter ones that are, you know, obviously more corporate focused, is the levels do range from what we call, you know, administrative all the way to executive. The typical group, though, for all these ERGs, and this is not purposeful, this just happened over time, is mostly salaried entry level to around the pipeline that goes to executives. So if you were to walk into an ERG event, or if you were to watch their leadership, you know, and the people that are running the ERG, you'll find entry salaried up to beginning executive salaried, and you'll only see a few examples of the groups that are more administrative and then more higher level execs being exception basis.
And one of the things that we've seen is in most companies, the ERG has someone in a very senior level role who sponsors them, and so that access to a senior level person seems to be a real coup for being part of the ERG.
Yeah, so that's a true statement, and every one of our sponsors, except for like two, just because there's just not enough, actually are right on our president's team. And if you remember the slide we had back a few slides ago, there was something called the Frito-Lay D&I Council. That actually is chaired by our Chief Personnel Officer and our president. And so, and of course, I help run it. And so literally, we just started that last year, and all of our ERGs and the sponsors and those inclusion councils I mentioned earlier all have access to those meetings and have portions of the meetings where they can present, share ideas. And of course, we have other venues, but last year we held 3 of them, and they were pretty successful. Gave much more visibility to the president and the staff, and of course much more visibility to the ERG leaders themselves. And that meeting, those meetings alone, typically obstacles get removed, and you get more visibility, et cetera, and of course networking.
Yeah, the next question I actually think has 2 parts to it. So they're asking how you get managers to support ERGs, and then they go on and talk about the fact that many managers think that ERGs are social clubs, and they don't see the value of the ERGs in supporting the organization goals. And so I think there's 2 parts there. One is, you know, how do you get the managers to support it? But I think also, you know, we talked about innovation as meaning an organization goal, but I was wondering if you could talk about other ways you can justify to a manager that ERGs are meeting the organizational goals. And, you know, maybe it's indirect, but there are other things they do and reasons they're formed that are, you know, purposeful in helping the company.
So I will start off by saying that we do believe here that we do have a mixed kind of bag on this. So we have for a long time set the direction, expectation, and I say we, not meaning me, we being our business leaders and our HR leaders have set the expectation that the ERGs are a critical tool, a critical aspect to obviously what we want and how we want our culture to evolve. And so we have set the expectation always that the hopefully not just activities, but really, you know, impactful initiatives that are happening through the ERGs are both obviously attended and people are highly engaged and leading and working, and that the manager is supporting and in many cases sometimes part of that initiative. So while we've set the expectation, I will tell you we do have a high number of people who feel like they're supported, and we measured that through, we have a pulse survey that happens several times a year, and then of course the bigger what we call org health surveys that many companies do, which happen biannually. I just looked at the numbers yesterday, and it is high % favorable that managers support employees in all these types of initiatives around D&I, and ERGs are a piece of that. So we do have a high percentage. It's very green. It's like 80 to 90%. So while I say that, I still have people come to me and say, hey, my manager's not supporting me, my involvement here. And so what we tend to do is try to coach them to help them share enough with their manager so their manager gets on board versus us being policing something like that. But I will tell you, I think it goes back to what you said, is having the right ability to share what is the point, what's the impact to both them as the manager, them as the employee, and ultimately to the business. You know, and I think if you can arm people with that, typically the manager can't say no, because obviously it's pretty obvious that there's benefit to the employee's growth, ultimately to that team, and to obviously the manager's outcomes as a team and as a business unit.
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask Gisela again, as a leader of an ERG, do you get any of these issues that come to you from your members?
Not so much. So I think because we have the different planks that are definitely focused on different areas, we do have the plank that's focused just on our membership and development, and it's a lot of mentorship that comes through and just training that we focus on there. And then it's definitely balanced with something, for example, in ours, we have Hispanic Heritage Month, which is kind of the large event that we do for the year, where we bring in a big speaker and we just celebrate all the kind of more cultural and fun things that we have within our membership. And then again, we have the business plank. So I feel like it definitely is balanced, and so we get, you know, whatever it is that you're kind of looking for out of the ERG as a member, you would find something that, you know, is kind of working towards those. So definitely haven't seen any kind of issues there.
Yeah, the next question is an interesting tactical question. In our ERG process, there's a voting process to get onto the board of ERGs. However, an individual who has performance issues is running for a place on the board. How has this been handled, or are there best practices for addressing this type of issue? So I'm going to put it up to the Frito-Lay team, and if anybody on the line has an answer to that, you can raise your hand also.
So we handle that case by case. We, in some cases, do have voting or elections, but as I said, we've kind of gone away from that more structure. But where we do, or even if it's not, and they're kind of in line to you know, obviously succession plan to go into a chair role or any role that takes a majority of a lot of effort, we basically speak to them one-to-one and ask them to withdraw. We put a plan together with them, just as hopefully the manager was doing anyway with them on their, you know, core role and what's not working for them or what impact they're not having. And so we literally just do it that way, trying to treat both them and then obviously what they're trying to accomplish with utmost respect. And we ask them to kind of withdraw versus us to make it more, you know, public and obvious. And it does happen. We actually just had somebody in the field that was leading one of our ERGs who wasn't doing as well and was struggling a bit and noticed it, and she actually raised her hand before we even, you know, made any move, and we just had that dialogue.
Thanks. Okay, next question. We are about to launch our first ERG/BRG and are considering branding and focusing the groups as BRG. What do you see as the pros, cons to going directly to BRG versus starting with an ERG and evolving?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question. So I think it obviously kind of depends on the context and what's going on in the corporate kind of culture, which, you know, could vary definitely across companies. From my perspective, I feel like with our history here and how we kind of started with, you know, maybe first I think it was Mosaic, which is about our African American community, and I feel like from our perspective, it's definitely been more of an advantage to start as an ERG, really build the membership, get people to buy in and understand, you know, why this group exists, and it's mostly to build the membership and develop them, and then with time, you know, start to understand how you can make more of a business impact. So from my perspective, I would definitely kind of start more on the ERG side, but of course that kind of depends on the corporate culture, as I mentioned, and then move towards how you can add more value for the business.
Yeah, and this is Lisa, and I would add that I think whether you try to start it as a BRG or not, it's going to go through its normal stages. As you know, we're all human, and the first thing that we need is to feel connection to people like ourselves, and then feel connection to the bigger whatever that is, right, whatever that bigger charter is. And so, as we talked about earlier, each ERG, at least in our space at Frito, has thought through that and worked through it. But first they have to have passion for something, and they have to have a united or end goal. And so it was interesting, as when I was working with the women's group, what we call WIN, we were seeing ERGs, right, go through that curve and get to business ideas, and we weren't, and we felt like we still weren't connected ourselves as a bunch of women, frankly, and we had a lot of disjointed ERGs across Frito-Lay. Even within our headquarter building in Dallas, we had four WIN ERGs that we weren't even talking with each other, not purposely. But so my point is I think you have to, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, start at that stage where people have to get together, right, have a shared kind of direction they want to go in, feel connected to each other, and then get to what is that business thing they're trying to solve. For WIN in particular, we started asking ourselves, what's unique about women, right, that can contribute to the business? Okay, well, we're a CPG company, and then we said, all right, well, we make most of the purchases, women make most of the purchases, 70–80% of all household goods, especially when it comes to food, it's even higher. You know, we love social media. So we worked through all these things and said, okay, I wonder if we could launch a social media campaign, raising our coupon awareness that we were launching 2 years ago, or our new products, and then do tasting and recipes. And so they found their niche of things, and then they started to work that way. But I think to get to that, you have to have the kind of growth beforehand that Gisela just spoke about.
Yeah, and just from what we've seen, across companies, it seems like the name of it is less important than the evolution they go through. Because we see some organizations that I would call BRGs based on what they're doing, but they're still called affinity groups, for example. So, and then we also see companies that are coming up with their own name, something that they've branded and that works for them. It looks like somebody has their hand up and has a question, so we'd love to get somebody else on the line here. If we still have Carolyn Watts on the line, can we let that person have the mic?
Carolyn, if you're still on, you're unmuted now. We can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you. It's just a little quiet.
Thank you. I am wondering, for the Frito-Lay folks in your plant environment, or if you have call centers where you're operating in a lean environment on excellence in operations management, or your participants, employees allowed to participate in ERGs in those areas as well?
Yes, I'll answer that. So I believe the question was, so please correct me if I'm wrong, being that we're all operating in lean environments where every minute counts, the idea of our employees, meaning our frontline or our hourly employees is what I think you're referring to, in our plants, call centers, distribution centers, are they allowed to participate? So our answer is yes. However, we do have guiding principles and guardrails around that because, as you know, right, most of that would occur on overtime. And so we do put some specifics in place. Where we found we've been able to engage those employees the most, and they also find high value in this, is typically on the community partnership spaces. And in that case, some of that work is voluntary and outside of work. And so that's where we've engaged them the most.
Yeah, we have another person who had a hand up, Stacy Bose, B-O-A-S-E. Can we unmute that person?
It's Stacy, you're unmuted, and we can hear you if you're still on.
All right, I think I'll ask the next question, and if she can get on, we'll take it after this one. So the next question is one that we've heard a lot from people, particularly the ERG leaders. How do you get members more involved, and how do you get them to increase their participation? This individual says they're constantly offering incentives to show up to meetings, but I think they're looking for some other options.
So one of the biggest things we did last year is we constantly do the same, just so you guys know you're not alone. We'll have like a D&I expo, and we'll both try to make it fun, by doing something that's totally fun. Like we had Minute to Win It games, right, where you could play and you didn't have to go to an ERG booth or whatever, but we try to pull people to engage them differently to at least get them in like you would do in any type of marketing scheme. But then secondly, though, we do offer incentives like you guys do, so we'll give, we'll do raffles and stuff. But one of the things I will tell you that I found that has helped the most in the last year, in my opinion, but I'd love to have Gisela's comment, is the fact that they have high visibility now to our executives. So in the past, even though each had a sponsor, now literally they get to see the president. He spends a huge amount of time in the year engaging with these folks and telling them how important it is to him. And not only has he done that in time with them, he's done that with the whole organization. Messaging, for example, our latest messaging around champion inclusion is critical. He's defined where he feels we are today, and he's defined where we should be tomorrow, and he's asking everybody to drive it. So one, I think, is the way we've gotten more people to come is that they know our leaders value it, and that we'll be recognizing it. We are still working through making sure folks get ample credit, as they take these lead roles on their personal, what we call PDRs or appraisals, and that they also get true growth experiences, and that's recognized as well. So I think that's the piece that makes the most difference. Smaller things, I make sure, just to help in case you guys can't get the president. I know that's not always that easy, and we're very fortunate in our CPO. But some smaller things I've done is each ERG, depending on their level, if you're the chair, they write a note to every person's manager at mid-year and full year that says what each person has contributed. It could be something as simple as they, put an initiative together, they helped, work on the idea, or they actually led the whole thing from beginning to end. Like, so Gisela will have a letter will go to her manager that'll tell him or her everything she's done, including the CEO thing, if we remember that levels of detail. And so we try to make sure that there's high awareness of the manager, and then that letter doesn't only just come from the ERG lead. We try to make sure I'm on copy, and then when I send the letters to the chair's managers, like so when I send one for Gisela and her manager, I will make sure that the president's copy, the CPO's copy. So again, there's more awareness and visibility and public appreciation. And then we also, lastly, try to do a lot of public appreciation. And then, of course, small gift certificates and different little small things help that are personal to the person.
And I think we have time for two more quick questions. So the next one is one that I've heard also at our summit and in other places, and that's that Frito-Lay is a customer-facing company, and it's kind of easier to come up with innovations and help with products. In what ways can a BRG help an organization if it's a B2B business or a some sort of non-customer-facing organization? And again, I'll just kind of kick that off and say that what we've seen from our members is that they can do that maybe a little less directly. So even in the innovation space, if the ERG is being innovative in the way they run their ERG, they're still taking those skills back to their own jobs. And innovation doesn't have to be about product facing. It can be innovation in process. It can be innovations in efficiency. So there's lots of opportunities there. And then just from the ways ERGs were set up in the first place, improved talent. If we're helping employees be better leaders by having the experience of leading, it's going to benefit the organization. So to the Frito-Lay team.
Yes, I will tell you exactly what you just said. So interestingly, to be very transparent, when we all started talking, I said, hey, when you say innovation, what do you mean? Because we've tried to be very purposeful on defining innovation, that it could be anything. It's the way the ERG runs. It's how it's structured. It could be a people innovation. And so example would be is our women's organization. I'm looking at them to try to come up with some of the examples for you guys. But our women's organization said, it would be great for all of our employees to know how our whole supply chain runs from seed to shelf. and every support function that happened. So they set up this huge expo where literally we understood where our potatoes are grown, you know, where the corn gets grown, all the way to every step after, and then they put a career lens on that and said, okay, not only are you going to talk about the process, now you're going to talk about the career and the role that you could have in these core departments that make Frito-Lay become who they are and make us, you know, the billion-dollar company. And so that was considered very innovative in the approach, the holistic nature of it, and the fact that there was both a know the business cold aspect, and then there was a career aspect that helped educate all the employees who attended. So that would be an example. The other thing we just did that we thought was innovative and how we did it, but we know we're not new to the party, is our Women of Color Alliance. We just launched a program that's sponsored protege. And so how we did it and what we did, we thought was fun and innovative, and it's an 18-month journey where we've tried to facilitate pair relationships of a sponsor and protege. So I agree with you. I think innovation could be multiple different things. And frankly, we picked Gisela to be on the call. Innovation because we're forward-facing and as a CPG company, while it seems easier for us, it's actually very hard because I talked about that limited resource problem we already have. And so many of our ERGs aren't working in the space because there's no need demographically, or because there's not a clear way of them adding value immediately to us that we know of. And so we're doing it where it makes sense, but in many cases, most of our ERGs are innovating in a different way.
Perfect. Yes, so I have one last comment that I want to read and answer, and I want to thank Carolyn for giving this to us because it's a perfect way to end this webinar. She asked if we have a database or resources of speakers, best practices that we can share, and have the speakers come in and speak to our ERGs. You know, how can we partner as ERGs to support each other and our events? It's almost like a social network for ERG leaders to share information. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here at CEO. So if you go to the CEO website, and I think that information is on the slides that you'll have access to, we have all the information from the past 2 summits, including all the notes from the speakers. We also have a LinkedIn group for our ERG leaders and D&I leaders, so that information will be available to you also. We'd love to help facilitate this group. So thanks for asking the question. Thanks for being on the webinar. And
actually, sorry, Theresa, and I just do want to thank this year's sponsors before we hang up again as well. Again, that is DirecTV, Sony Pictures Entertainment, and then our sponsor and host, Mattel. So thank you to the 3 organizations that are making that event that Theresa just described possible this year. We could not move forward without your engagement and support, and are grateful for the partnership. Thank you so much. With that, I want to thank our 3 speakers for today, Theresa, Welbourne, Lisa, and Gisela. Thank you so much for joining us and the great content and great session. For those of you who have questions, feel free to give the office the call or visit the website.